Captain Jake Harrison pulled his cargo ship into the docking bay of what looked like any other trading station. His fuel gauge was running dangerously low, and this remote outpost on the edge of known space seemed like his only option. The Star Runner had been his home for 3 years now, carrying goods between planets and trying to make an honest living in a galaxy that didn't always reward honest work. Jake stepped off his ship and immediately noticed something was wrong. The usual buzz of legitimate traders was replaced by hushed conversations and nervous glances. Alien species he'd never seen before moved through the shadows, their eyes gleaming with something that made his skin crawl. The air felt thick with tension and something else he couldn't quite name. He approached the station master, a bulky creature with 4 arms and skin like rough leather. "Just need fuel and supplies," Jake said, keeping his voice steady. "Should be a quick stop." The station master's multiple eyes studied him with interest. "Ah, a human. Perfect timing. We have special event today. Very profitable for those with refined tastes." The creature's mouth stretched into what might have been a smile, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Jake felt his stomach turn. "What kind of event?" "Come see for yourself. No charge to watch. Maybe you find something you like." Against his better judgment, Jake followed the station master through a series of corridors that led deeper into the station. The walls here were older, darker, and covered with strange symbols that seemed to pulse with their own light. Other beings moved past them. Some he recognized as wealthy traders and nobles from various worlds. Others were completely alien to him. They entered a massive circular chamber filled with tiered seating that reminded Jake of an ancient Roman Colosseum. Hundreds of creatures from dozens of different worlds filled the seats, all focused on a raised platform in the center. Jake's blood ran cold when he realized what he was looking at. This wasn't a trading post at all. It was a slave auction. On the platform stood a massive alien with dark red skin and arms as thick as tree trunks. This was Brutak, the auctioneer, and his voice boomed across the chamber as he presented his merchandise to the eager crowd. Jake watched in horror as being after being was brought onto the platform. Some looked human, others were clearly from distant worlds, but all shared the same look of fear and desperation. The crowd cheered and called out bids with the enthusiasm of people at a sporting event. Numbers flashed on screens around the chamber as prices climbed higher and higher. Jake's hands clenched into fists as he watched intelligent beings treated like objects to be bought and sold. Then everything changed. A guard led a young woman onto the platform and the entire chamber fell silent. She couldn't have been more than 20, with skin that seemed to shimmer between blue and silver in the harsh lights. Her eyes were large and expressive, filled with a mixture of terror and defiance that made Jake's heart ache, even from his position in the upper seats. He could sense something different about her, an almost electric presence that seemed to touch his mind. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brutak announced, his voice dripping with excitement, "we present tonight's special item. A purebred Altarian female enhanced with telepathic abilities far beyond her species' normal range, trained in the art of emotional connection and companionship, perfect for those seeking the ultimate in personal entertainment." The crowd erupted. Bids started flying faster than Jake could follow. The numbers on the screens climbed from thousands to millions of credits within minutes. Alien nobles leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the young woman with an intensity that made Jake sick. The woman, Kira, as Brutak called her, stood perfectly still on the platform. But Jake could see her hands trembling. Her eyes darted around the chamber, taking in the faces of potential buyers with growing horror. And somehow, impossibly, Jake felt her fear as if it were his own. A particularly loud cheer drew his attention to a section reserved for the wealthiest bidders. A creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and an octopus had just placed a bid that made the screens flash urgent red. This was Lord Vextron, a notorious collector known throughout the galaxy for his cruelty. The thought of Kira ending up in his hands made Jake's decision for him. 50 million credits, Jake called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet chamber. Every head turned toward him. Brutak's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with suspicion. The human bids 50 million. Do I hear 60 or... Vextron's tentacles writhed with anger as he doubled Jake's bid. The crowd began to murmur. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans weren't supposed to be here, weren't supposed to interfere with their twisted entertainment. Jake looked at his personal account balance and felt his heart sink. He had maybe 2 million credits to his name. Everything he'd saved from years of honest cargo hauling. But something in Kira's eyes, something in the way her fear seemed to reach out and touch his very soul, made him do something completely insane. 100 million credits, he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos in his head. He was betting everything on a bluff, hoping the electronic systems would accept his bid before checking his actual balance. The chamber fell silent. Lord Vextron's tentacles went rigid with shock. Other bidders looked around in confusion. Where had this human gotten that kind of money? Brutak's hammer came down with a sound like thunder. Sold to the human for 100 million credits! Jake felt his legs go weak. He just bought a person with money he didn't have, in a place he shouldn't be, surrounded by creatures who would probably kill him if they discovered his deception. But when he looked at Kira and saw the first hint of hope creep into her eyes, he knew he'd made the right choice. The only problem now was figuring out how to get them both out of there alive. Jake's hands shook as he transferred what little money he actually had as a down payment, knowing the station's systems would soon discover he couldn't cover the full amount. 2 heavily armed guards escorted him and Kira toward the docking bay, their weapons ready in case the human tried anything stupid. Kira walked beside him in heavy chains, her silver-blue skin pale with exhaustion. She hadn't spoken a word since leaving the auction platform, but Jake could feel waves of fear and confusion radiating from her. Every few steps, she would glance at him with those large, haunting eyes, trying to figure out what kind of monster had bought her. "Your ship better be worth the credits you just spent, human," growled one of the guards, a massive creature covered in scales and scars. Brutak doesn't like it when buyers can't pay what they promise. Jake nodded, trying to look confident while his mind raced through escape plans. The Star Runner wasn't much to look at, but she was fast and had a few modifications that weren't exactly legal. If he could just get Kira aboard and power up the engines before anyone realized what was happening. They reached his ship, and Jake quickly opened the cargo bay doors. The guards shoved Kira inside and turned to leave. "You have 1 hour to complete your payment verification," one of them called back. "After that, Brutak comes to collect personally." As soon as they were alone, Jake turned to face Kira. She had backed herself into the farthest corner of the cargo hold, her chains clanking against the metal walls. Her eyes darted between him and the exit, like a trapped animal looking for any chance to escape. "Hey," Jake said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay. You're safe now." Kira's voice came out as barely a whisper, but her words hit him like a punch to the gut. "Safe? You bought me. You own me now. What do you want me to do?" Jake felt sick hearing those words. He walked slowly to a storage locker and pulled out a plasma cutter, causing Kira to flinch backward in terror. But instead of threatening her, he knelt down and carefully cut through her chains. The heavy metal fell away with loud clanks that echoed through the cargo bay. "I didn't buy you to own you," Jake said, his voice firm but gentle. "I bought you to free you. Nobody touches you unless you want them to. Nobody tells you what to do. You're a person, not property." Kira stared at him in complete confusion, rubbing her wrists where the chains had left red marks. "I don't understand. Why would you spend all that money just to let me go?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Jake replied, helping her to her feet. "Where I come from, we believe every person has the right to choose their own path, no matter what species they are, no matter where they come from." For the first time since he'd seen her, Kira's expression changed from fear to something else, hope mixed with disbelief. Your people really believe that? Most of us do, Jake said, leading her toward the ship's living quarters. Look, I know. You have no reason to trust me. You've probably been hurt by a lot of different species. But I promise you this. I will never force you to do anything you don't want to do. He showed her to a small but clean cabin with its own bathroom and food. Dispenser. This is yours for as long as you need it. The door locks from the inside. You control who comes in and who stays out. Kira stepped into the room cautiously, as if expecting some kind of trap. She touched the lock controls with trembling fingers, and Jake heard the mechanism engage. A moment later, her voice came through the intercom, shaky, but growing stronger. You said you would free me. Does that mean you'll take me home? Jake's heart sank. He knew from galactic maps that Altarian space was on the other side of the galaxy, through some of the most dangerous territory known to travelers. With his ship's current condition and his non-existent bank account, it would be nearly impossible. I'll try, he said honestly, but I need to warn you. We're in trouble. I don't actually have the money I bid. When they figure that out, they're going to come after us with everything they've got. There was silence for a long moment. Then Kira's voice came back, stronger than before. Then we better leave now. Jake smiled, despite their desperate situation. Yeah, we better. He rushed to the bridge and began the startup sequence, his fingers flying over controls he knew by heart. The Star Runner's engines hummed to life just as alarms began blaring throughout the station. Someone had discovered his deception faster than he'd hoped. Kira, he called over the intercom. Hold on tight. This is going to get bumpy. The ship lurched forward as Jake pushed the engines to maximum power. Through the view screen, he could see security ships scrambling to intercept them. Energy bolts flashed past the hull as the station's defense systems opened fire. Human vessel. Return. To docking bay immediately, came a harsh voice over the communication system. You will surrender the merchandise and face justice for fraud. Jake switched off the radio and focused on flying. The Star Runner weaved between asteroids and debris, using every trick Jake had learned in his years of avoiding pirates and customs officials. Behind them, the station's ships fell further back, unable to match their speed. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. Word would spread quickly through the criminal networks. Bounty hunters would be after them within hours. And somewhere out there, Lord Vextron was probably already planning his revenge. As they jumped to hyperspace, Jake realized his life had just become infinitely more complicated. But when he thought about Kira's face when he'd cut those chains away, when he remembered the hope in her voice as she said they should leave together, he knew he'd made the right choice. Sometimes doing the right thing meant everything else became harder, but that didn't make it any less right. 3 days had passed since their escape from the auction station, and Jake knew they were being hunted. Every time he checked the long-range scanners, more ships appeared on the edges of their detection range. Word had spread fast through the criminal networks, and now half the galaxy seemed to be looking for them. Kira had barely left her room during those first 2 days, speaking only when Jake brought her food or checked if she needed anything. But on the 3rd morning, she surprised him by appearing on the bridge, her silver-blue skin looking healthier and her eyes more alert. I want to help, she said simply, settling into the co-pilot's chair. Jake looked up from the navigation charts he'd been studying. You don't have to do anything. Just rest and get your strength back. You risked everything to save me, Kira replied, her voice growing stronger. The least I can do is help keep us alive. She placed her hand on the scanner controls, and suddenly Jake felt something strange happening in his mind. It was like having another person's thoughts gently touching his own, but not in a frightening way. More like having a friend standing, right beside him, ready to help. I can sense other minds from a distance, Kira explained. It's how my people survived for thousands of years before we developed technology. If someone is hunting us, I'll know they're coming before they show. Up on your scanners. Jake nodded, grateful for any advantage they could get. What happened to you, Kira? How did you end up at that auction? Her expression darkened, and Jake immediately regretted asking. But after a moment, she began to speak. On my world, people like me are considered property from birth. My telepathic abilities are stronger than most, which made me valuable. When I was 16, my family sold me to pay off their debts. She paused, her hands clenching in her lap. I've been passed from owner to owner for 4 years. Each one promised they would treat me well, but she didn't need to finish. Jake could see the pain in her eyes, and he felt anger building in his chest. Not at her, but at every person who had treated her like an object instead of a living being with feelings and dreams. That's over now, Jake said firmly. No one will ever own you again. Kira looked at him with something like wonder. Your people really think differently, don't they? Even when I touch your mind, I can't find any desire to control me or use me. It's strange. But good strange. Their conversation was interrupted by alarms from the ship's detection system. Kira's eyes went wide, and her hand flew to her head. 3 ships, she said quickly. Coming fast from behind that asteroid field. The mines aboard them are hungry, violent. They're not here to capture us. They want to hurt us. Jake's hands moved over the controls, pushing the Star Runner to maximum speed. Through the view screen, 3 sleek fighter ships emerged from. Behind the asteroids, their weapons already charging. Bounty hunters, Jake muttered. They probably figure you're worth more dead than alive at this point. The first energy blast rocked their ship, and Jake threw them into a spinning dive toward a nearby planet. It was a barren world covered in deep canyons and towering rock formations, perfect for hiding if they could reach it. Can you sense what they're planning? Jake asked as more shots flew past them. Kira closed her eyes, concentrating. The lead. Pilot is overconfident. He thinks this will be easy. The other 2 are just following orders. Suddenly her eyes snapped open. Left! Turn left now! Jake jerked the controls, and a massive energy beam passed right through the space they'd been occupying a second before. Kira's warning had saved their lives. They dove into the planet's atmosphere, the 3 hunter ships right behind them. Jake flew the Star Runner through narrow canyons and around towering stone pillars, using every trick he'd learned as a cargo pilot to stay ahead of their pursuers. The middle ship is falling back, Kira reported, her eyes still closed in concentration. His engines are overheating, but the other 2 are getting angry. They're going to try something desperate. As if responding to her words, one of the hunter ships pulled ahead and turned to face them head-on, preparing for a kamikaze attack. Jake realized they were trapped between the oncoming ship and the canyon walls. Hold on, he said, and pushed the ship into a vertical climb that scraped their hull against the rock face. The hunter ship shot past them and smashed into the canyon wall in a brilliant explosion, but their celebration was short-lived. The remaining hunter had gotten behind them and was lining up for a killing shot. He's confident now, Kira said, sweat beading on her forehead from the mental strain. He thinks we're finished. Jake smiled grimly. Let's see if we can change his mind about that. He suddenly cut power to the engines and let the ship drop like a stone. The hunter ship shot overhead, and Jake restarted the engines, pulling up right behind their pursuer. Your turn to run, Jake said into the radio, and fired a warning shot that passed just over the hunter's cockpit. The bounty hunter got the message and fled toward space, apparently deciding that their bounty wasn't worth dying for. As they watched, the last hunter ship disappear. Kira turned to Jake with something approaching a smile. You fight like one of my people's ancient warriors, she said, but with kindness instead of hatred. Jake felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with their victory. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in the vast emptiness of space. But he knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, Lord Vextron was mobilizing resources that would make these bounty hunters look like children with toy weapons. And every day they stayed in this part of the galaxy, more hunters would come. Still, looking at Kira's face as she smiled for the first time since he'd met her, Jake knew they would face whatever came next together. The Star Runner limped through space with smoke trailing from her damaged engines. The latest bounty hunter attack had been too close for comfort, and Jake knew they wouldn't survive another fight in their current condition. The ship's hull was scorched in 3 places, and warning lights blinked red across every control panel. "There," Kira pointed to a small planet on the edge of the scanner. "I can sense human minds there, lots of them. They feel different from the other species we've encountered." Jake studied the readings. Haven's Edge. It's a frontier colony. Humans who left Earth to build something new out here. He paused, considering their options. They might help us, or they might turn us in for the bounty. It's a gamble. "Everything we've done has been a gamble," Kira replied with a weak smile. "At least these are your people." As they approached the planet, Jake's radio crackled to life. "Unknown vessel, this is Haven's Edge Control. State your business." "This is Captain Jake Harrison of the cargo ship Star Runner. We're damaged and requesting emergency landing permission." There was a long pause. "Harrison, are you the one who's been all over the bounty networks? The human who stole some aliens' property?" Jake's heart sank. Even out here, word had spread. "Sir, I didn't steal anyone. I freed someone who was being sold as a slave. If you're going to turn us in, just say so now." Another pause, longer this time. When the voice came back, it sounded different, warmer. "Well, why didn't you say so in the first place? Landing pad 7 is clear. Welcome to Haven's Edge." The colony was smaller than Jake had expected, just a few hundred buildings clustered around a central hub. But the people who met them at the landing pad looked tough and capable, the kind of humans who could carve out a life on the edge of known space. Their leader was a woman named Commander Chen, a former Earth military officer with graying hair and sharp eyes. She listened without interruption as Jake explained their situation, from the auction to their desperate flight across the galaxy. "So you spent everything you had to buy this girl's freedom," Chen said when he finished. "And now half the criminal. Underworld wants you dead." "That's about the size of it," Jake admitted. Chen looked at Kira, who had stayed close to Jake's side throughout the conversation. "And what do you want, young lady? This is your story, too." Kira straightened her shoulders. "I want to help Jake survive. He showed me that I have value beyond what others want to use me for. He taught me that I can choose my own path." "Choose your own path," Chen repeated thoughtfully. "That's what we came out here for, too. Earth got too crowded, too controlled. Out here, a person can make their own decisions." She turned back to Jake. "How long before they find you?" "Could be hours, could be days," Jake replied. "But they will find us. Lord Vextron has resources we can't match." "Lord Vextron?" Chen's expression darkened. "That monster has been raiding shipping lanes and enslaving anyone he can get his tentacles on for years. The Colonial Authority issued warnings about him months ago." Jake felt a spark of hope. "Then you'll help us?" "Help you?" Chen laughed. "Son, we've been waiting for someone to give that creature a bloody nose. You just gave us the perfect excuse." Within hours, the entire colony was mobilizing. Jake watched in amazement as ordinary farmers and miners transformed into an organized defense force. They had military-grade weapons hidden in barns and communication equipment that could reach across star systems. "We're not just farmers out here," Chen explained as they worked. "Most of us served in various military forces before coming to Haven's Edge. We know how to fight." But their preparations were interrupted when Kira suddenly staggered, her hand pressed to her head. "They're coming," she gasped. "So many ships! And the anger! Lord Vextron is furious!" Jake helped steady her. "How long do we have?" 6 hours, maybe less." Kira's face was pale with strain. "But Jake, there's something else." I've been sending out messages through my telepathic abilities, telling other enslaved beings about what you did, about humans who believe in freedom." "What kind of messages?" Chen asked. "Stories of hope," Kira replied. "I told them that there are people in the galaxy who believe everyone deserves to choose their own life. The messages have spread further than I imagined." Suddenly, the colony's long-range communications lit up with incoming signals. Ships were approaching from multiple directions, not just Lord Vextron's fleet, but vessels from dozens of different worlds. "Some of those ships belong to freed slaves," Kira said with growing excitement. "Others are from species who never believed change was possible. Your message of freedom traveled farther than we thought." Jake stared at the display in disbelief. "You mean we're not alone in this?" "Son," Chen said with a grin that reminded Jake of his old military commanders, "I don't think you realize what you started when you stood up in that auction house. You didn't just save one person, you started a revolution." As the hours passed, more ships arrived. Former slaves who had escaped their captors, merchants who were tired of paying protection money to criminals, even some military vessels from worlds that had grown sick of the slave trade. But Lord Vextron's fleet was still the largest and most heavily armed. When they finally appeared on the scanners, Jake counted over 50 warships bristling with weapons. "People of Haven's Edge," Lord Vextron's voice boomed over the radio. "Surrender the human and his stolen property, and we will leave your world in peace. Refuse, and we will take what we want by force." Commander Chen picked up the radio with steady hands. "Lord Vextron, this is Haven's Edge. We have a counteroffer. Leave our system now, and we won't blow your ships out of space." Lord Vextron's laughter was like ice scraping on metal. "Foolish humans, you are outnumbered 10-1. "Maybe," Chen replied calmly. "But we're fighting for something you'll never understand. We're fighting for the right to choose." Jake looked around at the faces of the colonists. Farmers, miners, shopkeepers, and mechanics who had taken up weapons to defend strangers they'd never met. He saw the same determination in their eyes that he'd felt when he first heard Kira's story. "Whatever happens," he said to Kira, "I'm glad we made it this far." Kira took his hand, and for a moment, her telepathic abilities let him feel what she was feeling. Not fear or despair, but hope. Pure, bright hope that things could be better. "We're going to win this," she said quietly. "Not because we're stronger, but because we're fighting for something that matters." As the first enemy ships entered the planet's atmosphere, Jake realized she was right. They weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for an idea that could change the galaxy forever. The battle for Haven's Edge began at dawn. Lord Vextron's massive warships descended through the orange sky like dark clouds, their weapons already charging for the attack. From his position in the colony's command center, Jake watched the enemy fleet approach and tried not to think about how outgunned they were. "Remember," Commander Chen's voice crackled over the radio to all defensive positions, "we're not trying to destroy them all. We just need to hold out long enough for our reinforcements to arrive." Jake looked at the scanner display. The ships Kira had contacted with her telepathic messages were still hours away. Until then, it was just the colonists and their hidden weapons against one of the most powerful criminal fleets in the galaxy. The first enemy shots lit up the morning sky. Energy beams carved deep trenches in the ground around the colony's outer defenses. But the humans were ready. Hidden missile launchers rose from concealed positions, sending rockets screaming toward the attacking ships. Direct hit on the lead. "Cruiser!" reported one of the gunners. "But she's still coming!" Jake felt helpless watching the battle unfold around him. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a cargo pilot who had made one impulsive decision to do the right thing. But when he looked at Kira, who was using her abilities to coordinate the defense by sensing enemy movements, he knew that decision had been worth everything. "Jake," Kira said suddenly, her eyes wide with concentration. "Lord Vextron is in the command ship directly above us. He's..." He's planning something terrible. He wants to make an example of this place. Through the view screen, they could see the massive command vessel hovering over the colony's center. Its main weapon, a cannon that could level entire city blocks, was slowly turning toward them. "All defenders, this is command." Chen's voice was urgent. "The big ship is charging its primary weapon. We have maybe 2 minutes before—" She never finished the sentence. The communication system went dead as enemy fire took out the main transmission tower. But in that moment of despair, something incredible happened. Kira stood up, her silver-blue skin beginning to glow with an inner light that Jake had never seen before. "I can reach them," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "All the enslaved beings throughout the galaxy. I can show them what's happening here." "Kira, that kind of telepathic broadcast could kill you," Jake said, grabbing her arm. She looked at him with eyes full of determination and love. "Some things are worth dying for. You taught me that when you bid everything you had for my freedom." Before Jake could stop her, Kira placed her hands on the communication console and closed her eyes. The glow around her grew brighter, and suddenly Jake could feel her mind reaching out across impossible distances, touching millions of enslaved beings throughout the galaxy. Through her telepathic link, beings on 1,000 different worlds suddenly saw the battle for Haven's Edge. They saw humans fighting and dying to protect one freed slave. They saw ordinary people standing up to overwhelming odds because they believed in something bigger than themselves, and they saw that change was possible. Mining worlds where slaves had toiled for generations, tools were dropped and chains were broken. On pleasure ships where beings were kept for entertainment, captives rose up against their captors. Across the galaxy, the enslaved remembered what freedom felt like and decided to fight for it. But the effort was costing Kira everything. Jake could see her life force draining away as she maintained the impossible telepathic network. "The ships," she whispered, her voice growing weak. "Look at the ships." Jake turned to the scanner and felt his heart leap. The fleet of liberation ships Kira had contacted wasn't hours away anymore. They were dropping out of hyperspace right above Haven's Edge. Dozens of vessels, representing every species that had ever been enslaved, had come to join the fight. But, more than that, Lord Vextron's own fleet was beginning to fall apart. The enslaved beings serving aboard his ships had joined the uprising. Enemy vessels were turning their weapons on each other as crews fought for control. "What's happening?" Lord Vextron's voice screamed over the radio. "My own people are betraying me." "They were never your people." Jake grabbed the radio and spoke directly to the crime lord. "They were prisoners you forced to serve, but now they remember what freedom feels like." The tide of battle turned in minutes. Lord Vextron's command ship, battered by attacks from his own fleet and the newly arrived liberation forces, began to fall toward the planet's surface. Jake watched through the view screen as the massive vessel crashed into the desert outside the colony. Its threat finally ended. But when he turned back to Kira, she had collapsed. Her skin was pale and cold, and her breathing was barely perceptible. "Kira!" Jake knelt beside her, holding her hand. "Stay with me. We won. You did it." Her eyes fluttered open, and she managed a weak smile. "I can feel them, Jake. Beings all across the galaxy, choosing freedom for the first time, choosing to say no to those who would own them." "You need medical attention," Jake said, but Kira shook her head. "I'm not dying, Jake. I'm just tired. But I want you to know, what I choose is to stay here with you, not because I have to, but because I want to." Jake felt tears in his eyes. "Are you sure? I could still try to get you back to your home world." "My home is wherever I can make my own choices," Kira replied, "and I choose to help you and these humans build something better." In the days that followed, Haven's Edge became the center of a new movement. Species from across the galaxy sent representatives to discuss what Kira was calling the Freedom Accords. agreements that would protect the rights of all sentient beings to choose their own paths. Jake found himself appointed as one of the human representatives, though he still couldn't quite believe how much his life had changed. From a simple cargo pilot to someone helping shape the future of galactic civilization. "Do you ever regret it?" Kira asked him one evening as they watched the sunset from the colony's central plaza. "Giving up your old life?" Jake thought about his answer carefully. His ship was grounded, his savings were gone, and he was now responsible for helping coordinate the largest civil rights movement in galactic history. His quiet life of hauling cargo between worlds seemed like something from another lifetime. "No," he said finally. "I spent years just getting by, just surviving. But you taught me the difference between existing and really living." Kira smiled and took his hand. "You taught me something too. You showed me that freedom isn't just about being unshackled. It's about being with people who respect your choices. Around them, beings from dozens of different worlds work together to build something unprecedented. A society based on the simple human principle that everyone deserves the right to choose their own destiny. And at the center of it all was the friendship between a cargo pilot and a freed slave who had discovered that the most powerful force in the galaxy wasn't weapons or money or fear. It was the simple belief that everyone, no matter who they were or where they came from, deserved to be free. The revolution they had started in a dingy auction house had grown into something that would change the galaxy forever. And it all began with one human who refused to let someone be bought and sold like property. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of courage. And sometimes the most important thing you can say to someone is simply, "You get to choose."